everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited. Welcome, welcome, welcome to your very first Careerist UX course. So let's dive in. So I'm Amanda, and a little bit about me. So I am right now the president and principal researcher of my own firm called Stockwell Strategy, but I've been in UX for like 15 years. I've worked in basically every iteration of UX job that there can be. So I started working at a startup. I moved to a huge Fortune 100 company, and then I worked at an agency, and then I've been consulting and doing my own thing. I started as a generalist. I did design work. Now I mostly do research and strategy work. So any kind of flavor of UX job, essentially, I have been in. So the good news also is that I am just one of the very awesome instructors at Careerist. You've got a whole team of people here to support you. So the other person who you're going to actually really want to remember, because Mo will be with you for all of the classes. So Mo's your support specialist. If you have any questions, anything about logistics, when is homework due, I'm having trouble submitting something came up and I need to miss class, anything like that, Mo is your person. So make friends with Mo, save Mo's contact number. And me and the other instructors are happy to help as well. But, we kind of come in and out as our schedules allow, because we're all working on super lots of stuff, but Mo will be absolutely there for you all the time. Great. So let's cover just a little bit of background agenda. We've got a lot to cover, a lot of great content, and I want to give you a little preview. And then we'll dive right in, since I don't want to spend too much time. So today we're going to really introduce you and talk more about the Careerist program, all of the great people here, and kind of what makes us different than some of the other places. We're going to talk a lot more in general about UX design and what that means and what that looks like. We'll talk about kind of the general tasks, what it actually looks like to be a UX professional on a day-to-day basis. And then we'll dig into some more details about the actual program. So the different phases, what you'll learn in each of them, what you'll apply, kind of all the different steps that we have. And then I'll give an overview of the instructors and the experts, the awesome team that we have at Careerist. And then there's a little practice at the end, so you can kind of see what it's like to start working, doing some of the hands-on work. Great. So hopefully most of you have at least some idea who Careerist is, because you're here. But I want to give you a little bit more background about who we are and what we really care about. So Careerist is, it's a career training platform, right? So really our focus, our goal, our mission is to provide access to tech jobs. Tech jobs are in high demand, they're high paying, and sometimes it can feel like there's a little bit of a barrier, it can be hard to get in. And Careerist was really kind of formulated around the idea that we want to make it accessible for everybody. So there are more than 300 of us at Careerist kind of supporting this, instructors, experts, there's a big team here kind of making it all happen. But it's really led by industry experts, people who are working in the fields that we teach in, and then a really structured approach to learning and applying practice and getting practice and really setting you up to land a job. So there's the first part, which is kind of the traditional boot camp part. There's the lessons where you'll have an instructor, you'll do hands-on practice, that sort of thing. But also built into the program is an internship, career coaching, interview prep, resume and LinkedIn profile support, and a whole bunch of support and a job application service. So we really want to focus on helping people get jobs. And so far, we've had some pretty good outcomes. So graduates from the various careers programs work at some companies I think you may have heard of before. Oh, I don't know, Uber, Apple, Google, Facebook, Meta now, but same. As you can see, everything from Nike to Groupon, Samsung to CBS, Instagram to Salesforce. There's over 1,000 tech companies in 40 states that have Careerist grads working there already. And one of the really awesome things is that although lots of technology companies hire us, there's also technology jobs in a lot of different kinds of industries and roles. So if there's something you're really passionate about or already have experience in, travel and transport or sports or media, we've got graduates there too. So there's about 24 different industries that we already have folks in. So more and more organizations, really actually nearly everyone now, everyone that has a website, a mobile app, any kind of digital presence essentially is hiring technicians. So the really cool thing about these careers is that not only could you work at a technology company that's building technology, but all kinds of companies that aren't technology focused necessarily still have technology needs. And I'm looking at this list, by the way. I've worked for one, two, three, four, four of these groups, and in various capacities over the years. And I know that they've got great teams. So lots of opportunity for those of us in the tech world, and that's what we're really passionate about bringing people to. And to kind of put that into perspective for you, we mentioned this a little bit already, but we've had great success, and not just in Silicon Valley, and not just in New York City, and not just in the places that are traditionally thought of as tech hub spots, but we've got over 1,000 companies who have hired careers graduates all across the states. Of course, we're missing a few, New Hampshire and Vermont, shout out New England, and some of those Western and Northern states, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. But we have graduates all over the country, and we have almost 60% of our graduates are working remotely. So I know that that's something that comes up a lot. Oh, Mississippi, didn't mean to not shout you out. But we've got graduates all over the place, and I know that's something that a lot of people find really appealing is remote work. And I'm here to definitely encourage you that there are still tons of remote jobs in technology. We've got a pretty wide swath of people. So almost no matter where you live, there's probably a careerist grad already there too, and already working there. So you'll be in good company. All right, great. So let's talk a little bit about UX and UI design, and what is it that we actually do, right? Like, what does it actually mean on a day-to-day basis? So a UX designer or UX professional is a person who creates product interfaces based on functionality, usability, and accessibility. And I want to also just point something out, because this is something that gets asked a lot. UX and UI are technically not interchangeable. User experience is kind of the blanket term for all of the fields that go into all of the stuff that we're working on. And UI refers to the interface part of creating that. So they're technically different things. UI is technically part of UX. I'm going to say UX design just for brevity as we're moving through, but you'll hear that used interchangeably with a lot of different things. So if you hear UX designer, user experience designer, product designer, interaction designer, those all kind of refer to the same thing. There are some nuances, there are some differences, but they're all kind of similar job titles. So just to be super clear about that part, I'll say UX designer or UX professional. User experience, again, is just the blanket term, but it means that user experience people are concerned with all of the parts that go into creating a great experience, understanding who people are, what they need, and then actually crafting the products, interfaces, designs, whatever it is we're building to fit those needs. So as I mentioned, pretty much any organization that you interact with that has a website or a mobile app or even a digital service of any kind, they all have UX teams. They all have people with skills like ours who are looking to understand what's going on, looking to understand how can we understand people better, looking to understand how can we craft the experience more. So on the more day-to-day specific level, there's a couple of kind of key components of the things that we do. So really the core function, and the reason it's called user experience design, not just web design or graphic design or anything else, is that UX design is about understanding users. So whoever is going to be interacting with the thing that you're building and really deeply understanding what they need and what they're trying to do, what their motivations and goals are, and then crafting products to really solve their problems and meet their needs. So the thing that's different about UX design from something like web design is that a web designer might know a lot about color and texture and putting together layout. And it's not to say that that stuff isn't important, but UX design is more inclusive than that. UX design takes skills like that, like understanding color palettes and textures and layout, and integrates that with deep knowledge about researching the needs, creating those actual screens, and then doing ongoing research, usability tests generally, to understand if what they've built is doing a good job. So you might also hear people in UX say something like, sometimes we say that our job is figuring out what to build, so figuring out the right thing to build, and then figuring out the right way to build it, or making sure that we're building it the right way. So not just relying on our opinions or the opinions of a high paid stakeholder, but really relying on getting and incorporating feedback from the real people who are going to be interacting with what you build. So I like to joke that being a UX designer is like being professionally curious and professionally interested in people. That doesn't mean you have to be super social. I know some of us aren't, but it does mean that you have to be really focused on what people do and what they think and what they need. And there are some pretty good perks that come with being a UX professional. So, obviously there's a range. It's going to depend a little bit on what sort of organization you work for, what the geography is, what your past experience is, but very generally, UX designers are really well paid. So entry-level jobs in the 65 to 105K range. And with more experience, that bumps up and up. So up to 125, and of course that will continue to improve as you get more experience. So it's also not just that it's a generally high level. Glassdoor ranked it 6th highest paying entry-level job. And although the economy is a little bit weird and things are a little bit weird right now, demand for UX designers is still really high. Salaries are really competitive. There's still a lot of jobs and a lot of folks looking for talented people. So lots of opportunity. And as we mentioned, basically any company that has any kind of interface might be looking to hire a UX designer. That's why there's so many jobs, because, I literally can't think of an organization right now that I know of, any company at all, that doesn't have at least a basic website, right? So think about it, anything from e-commerce, of course, if you're online buying stuff, but then things that you might not think about as much too, like logistics. There's actually tons of technology in logistics, keeping track of inventory and tracking where it's going, all that kind of stuff. Healthcare is a huge one right now. As can probably be guessed, healthcare could use actually some even more of this. The experiences are not always great. So there's more and more health companies of various kinds really trying to hire more people with the skills in the UX profession. So, and then there's the ones that are kind of more obvious, right? Like gaming and social apps and online dating, all that kind of stuff. But basically any organization that has an interface, any kind of digital product or digital interactions, that's where you could work as UX designer. So no matter what you're passionate about, no matter what you're interested in, there's probably a UX job that marries those things together. Great. And then one of the other really awesome things about UX careers is that there's a lot of different ways that you can grow. In a lot of traditional kind of careers, you can basically just be an individual contributor, and then you can decide to, move up and be a people manager. And of course that there is that progression if you want to grow vertically. If you're interested in, mentoring others and building teams and doing the more people management side of things, you can kind of go up that ladder, right? From a junior designer to a designer to senior, lead, principal, manager, director. You can kind of go up that path if you want, but you don't have to. You can also grow horizontally, right? Which means that you can decide to kind of be a generalist and look at all the kind of different areas of UX, or you can decide to grow vertically by getting really specific into, say, one industry or one piece of UX, or you can just grow to be able to take on really complex, ambitious, interesting projects, and really staying an individual contributor, meaning you're not managing people, but getting really experienced in a particular horizon. So there's lots and lots of ways that you can grow, and lots of different kind of directions that you can go. So you're not stuck to the like, I guess I'll just stay an individual contributor and then maybe I'll be a manager, maybe not. There's lots of opportunities in UX to move around. And I feel very lucky. I feel very fortunate that I found my way into UX early on in my career. And I really just love, I love sharing this with people, and I really love when I can help people get into this too, because I just feel so lucky to be here. So there's a lot of really great perks of being in UX. So the first one, of course, is there's so much demand. There's so many places that need to hire UX designers, because like I said, every organization essentially has at least a website, probably a mobile app, probably some sort of way to interact digitally, and even things that you might not think about, like of course in a hotel you might book something online, but hotels or something like that have tons of background technology to do things like keep track of the housekeeping, or keep track of the ordering systems for all the food that they have to have, all that kind of stuff. So there's tons of demand, and I don't see it slowing down no matter what else is going on in the economy or the world. It keeps being something that there's lots of jobs for. And with that, as I mentioned, even the really beginner positions are pretty well paid, because there's so much demand, because these skills are so needed. They're highly compensated. And so of course those are kind of the usual things, like, can I get a job and how well I get paid? But those are really tangible things. But there's a lot of other really great things about working in UX too. And one of them is really the remote work opportunity. So I know that since COVID, a lot of people have been working remotely, but I've actually been working remotely for about 10 years, long before COVID. And of course, sometimes I travel to meet clients or meet people in person. That there's tons of jobs that you can do either in a hybrid way, so you don't have to travel, or you just travel a little bit, or just go into the office a little, or completely remotely. Lots of organizations don't even have offices anymore. I know my husband's job, they don't even have an office. They are all 100% remote. And as you mentioned before, there's a lot of flexibility to choose what industry you're in. So if you're really passionate about education or sports or cryptocurrency or whatever it is, like I said, nearly every industry, nearly every organization has kind of need for UX skills. So you're not limited there. And importantly, this is a question that we get all the time. Do I have to code to be a UI designer? Absolutely not. No. That's not to say that you can't have coding skills, or that you might not utilize some coding skills if you want to do some prototyping or something, but it's probably been a good 10 years since I've done any coding. It is absolutely not necessary. So for that reason, you can use your technical and your analytical skills. That's actually one of the things that I love too. I come from an engineering background, and I like doing some of that more analytical work. I like doing some of the more concrete technical stuff, but you also get to be creative. You also get to talk to people if you want to. You also get to, really focus on design. And so there's a really good balance of those different sets of skills, and you can kind of lean into one direction or another depending on what you're interested in. And so those are all things that are, kind of more tangible benefits. But some of my favorite things about working in UX are these other things that are sometimes a little bit harder to quantify. But one of them is that it can be really satisfying to see how your decisions are really helping people. So UX is one of those careers where you very often can see a very tangible connection between what you've done and making someone's day better, right? So it depends on what you're working on. But as an example, I've previously done some work with health insurance company that they can't change some things about the forms, but they really wanted to make them easier for people to understand so that interacting with their health insurance was a more pleasant experience. And watching people interact with the old version and then the new version of of some of those documents, and watching people have who are already maybe under in stressful situations, or maybe there's a medical emergency, making their lives easier is so lovely. And so you can really sometimes see the tangible difference that you can make in people's lives, which is, it's hard to quantify. There's no amount of money that you can put to that, but it's really cool. And there's really, the impact on how the technology changes. So, things that you might have in findings from research might change the course of the direction of the product overall, or might change the vision for the company based on user research that you do. So not only can you have a lot of impact on the end users, but you can have a big impact inside your team and your company as well. And then the final thing that you probably don't know unless you're already in the UX community, but the professional community of UX people is one of the most supportive I've ever witnessed. I have never seen more offers to help, free networking events. There's tons of, for instance, I follow lots of UX people on LinkedIn, and there are always people posting like, hey, I have a couple of hours free. I'm going to set up some office hours. If you're new in the field and you want to ask me some questions, or if you want to get feedback on your resume, that kind of stuff. And pretty much no matter where you are, there are some local communities that do things, sometimes they're just casual meetups, sometimes they're more, sort of structured events, but the UX community is a tight knit one. And for the most part, we're really supportive, and it's not really competitive. It's the kind of place where we want everyone to succeed. I guess maybe that's what happens when when you have a group of people who is centered around making sure that other people are being paid attention to and taken care of. That extends beyond our attention to the user. It extends to our fellow UXers too. So those are things some of them you may have known, some of them you may not, but there's a lot of really great things about being in UX. I'm excited for you to join us. Great. And then the other thing that I also really love about UX is that there's no one direct path in. People come from all walks of life, all kinds of different backgrounds, and there's not a prescribed, like, you must go to this kind of college and get this kind of degree, you must have this graduate degree, that sort of thing. People come from all over the place. So if you have something like, marketing background, or like event planning, you already know things about, behavior. If you already do things like business or data analysis, you already have some of the analysis skills you might need. If you've ever been in sales or support or behavioral health or communications, you might have some background in understanding users and kind of crafting things to them, and interacting with them. If you've got a visualization background, so if you've been some kind of designer or photographer, or some technology background, in all of those cases, there are skills that you can use that will transfer. But the other thing that I really love is that there are also people who come from all kinds of different places. So, past students we've had have come from things like being a math teacher, being a theater technician, being a chef, being a delivery driver. I know someone who used to be a truck driver who's now in UX design. I don't actually think he went to Gurus. He kind of figured it out on his own. But you can come from really any sort of background and be successful in UX. So gatekeeping here. We are a group that is not only used to having people come from all over the place, but that expertise is really valued. And so, one way that we kind of say that people can get in is if you have some kind of specific background, like let's say you've been a math teacher, maybe you can work in some kind of field that is related to math. So you can use some of those skills or some of that other background, unless you are just trying to get away from it. I don't know. I like math, so I would still work on math stuff. But the I guess really the saying there is that, or the takeaway there is that it doesn't matter where you come from, your past experience can be helpful in UX. And it's actually like important for people as they build teams to purposely get people from different backgrounds. So that's something I also really love about UX. Great. Okay, so we've talked about some of the background, some of the different ways that you might find your way into UX, but let's look at a little bit more detail about, like, what does it actually mean to be a UX designer? Like, what do we do? Okay, great. So we understand people and we help craft things, but what does that actually mean, and what kind of context could we be working in? So the truth is that it could mean a lot of different things. Um, we might work on something like a really large scale project, like a complete redesign of an existing brand, or you might be really focused on like an individual component of a product if you work in house somewhere. I know people who work at really big companies who are fully dedicated to one part of a product, like a specific function or section on an existing site. So it also could be that you are building something completely brand new, a website that hasn't existed before, or a new version of an app. So regardless of the context, really the goal is always to make sure that you are building something that will work for a user, that will help them solve their goals, right? It'll help them achieve their goals, and it will be built in a way that is easy for them to use and visually pleasing. And I want to kind of emphasize there that, of course, the visual pleasing is important, but it's not the core focus, right? The visual layer is like icing on the cake. It's not the cake. It's kind of the whole package is the important part. So it's super important. It's a really important component of it, but it's not the whole thing. So overall, a UX professional's job is going to be to build something that will solve the need for a user and have it be an enjoyable experience as they're doing it. So with that in mind, let's look at some examples of what that could look like, right? Because the thing about UX is that you never just build something in a vacuum. You never just say, I want this to look pretty, or I want to build something for no reason. There's always some initial gap between what a user is trying to get done and what is actually there. We call that a problem. It's not always a problem, right? People aren't always going to necessarily have a frustration. Sometimes they do, but there's always some kind of gap in between what a user is trying to do and what is currently possible. So there's more details to this. You can certainly learn more. You'll get these slides later, but let's just kind of walk through at a high level a couple of examples of kinds of problems and solutions. So the first one is WhatsApp. If you're not familiar, it's a messaging app. Lots of people use it to send messages. It's like chatting, but it works over Wi-Fi. So there is a delete option, or there was a delete option in WhatsApp that it was really easy to delete just for yourself and not for everyone. But once you had deleted it for yourself, it wasn't there, so you couldn't interact with it in order to delete it for everyone. And there was lots of feedback that, in fact, the reason somebody would want to delete a message was never for themselves. It was for the other people in the chat. So that's kind of an example of sort of understanding a gap, right? A problem. And so potential solutions are, or a solution that was kind of suggested was a pop-up to confirm after selecting the delete for me option. That confirmation layer being an extra kind of, we call it a level of friction before the change, so that people didn't accidentally delete the message for me. So in that case, you might be thinking, oh, like actually we made something harder, right? Like we added a step. But in that case, there's an addition in order to improve the overall experience. So sometimes improving the experience does mean adding a step, right? Sometimes it does mean that there's more to do, but also more control, right? So that's a good example of that. Another one is LinkedIn, right? So as you probably know, LinkedIn is really commonly used for people to look for jobs, but it's also really commonly used for recruiters to look for candidates for positions. This is something you will get really familiar with in later parts of the careers program. But for a recruiter, the most effective way for them to kind of do their reach out and talk to candidates is to know where they're at in the searching process, right? So some people might be really actively looking for a job, like they don't currently have one and they could start right away. Other people might, have a job that they don't really like, but they're not going to quit until they find something better. And other people might be on LinkedIn just to like learn, but they're really happy with their jobs and they don't really want to be bothered, right, by recruiters. But not knowing where people were at made it really difficult for recruiters to know how to reach out to people, because they might look at your background and be like, oh, they would be perfect for this job, but not have any idea if you were looking for a job or not. And so a potential solution suggested was to ask candidates about their motivations periodically, right? And then store that information so that recruiters could look at it. So if you've been on LinkedIn lately and seen the little like open to hire, open to, open to talking to recruiters, open to freelance opportunities, that kind of thing. And so again, this is an example where this is a existing product, but a new feature, right? And sort of an iteration of a feature to make it easier and a better experience for both kinds of users, both the candidates and the recruiters, because then the recruiters know what the candidates are looking for, and then the candidates get the kind of reach out that is appropriate for them. Same thing with SoundCloud. So again, if you're not familiar, SoundCloud is a content provider essentially. So they have mostly, I think they started with music, but then there was sort of a gap that they realized that their users might also want to listen to podcasts, right? They want to like discover new podcasts, share clips. They might want to add in viewed comments, that kind of stuff. So there was a new feature, kind of suggested to let users discover and listen to podcasts, preview them, and really kind of aid in discovery time. So again, you can read much more about each of these, but we just want to kind of to give you some practice framing that problem, the kind of gap in experience between what's been offered for an existing company, right? And it's not like WhatsApp and LinkedIn and SoundCloud didn't have users. It's not like they were trying to build something brand new necessarily, but by understanding who their users were and what they were trying to get done, what their experience was like, it allowed people to suggest and build things that would solve those problems for them and improve the experience overall. Yeah, and so I'm sure most of you have had an experience where maybe you've seen a mobile or web app that probably didn't have such a great UX team behind it, or maybe no UX team at all, or maybe there were some constraints. But I think everybody has had some experience where they've tried interacting with something and it wasn't working the way they thought it should, or they tried something new and it was fine, but it was lacking something that made it really valuable to them. Threads comes to mind, if any of you recall how that got really popular right when Twitter became X. But then they didn't have the at functionality, right? So like, what's Twitter without adding? Well, turns out that's Threads, and no one really uses it. So it's important to kind of think about what that can look like. And so I'm sure most of you have seen examples of that. And it's also important to know that it's not just digital, right? Another example that we use all the time is remote controls. That, if any of you have an Apple TV, that little Apple remote, we bought my mom an Apple, an Apple TV years ago. She still can't figure out the remote. She stopped using it. She just basically doesn't watch TV anymore. She didn't watch it that much to begin with, but she couldn't figure out how the remote worked. It wasn't intuitive to her. And so, and she's not tech savvy. She texts and does stuff on her phone and works on her computer all the time, but that remote just doesn't make any sense to her. So I'm sure you've seen some other examples too. And those are the kinds of gaps, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about when we're saying you sort of identifying a problem that to be fixed. Great. And so although we just talked about a bunch of different variations, a bunch of different kinds of problems to solve, and there's, completely different projects and different contexts, that's always going to be true in UX. When you come to one of my classes, you'll hear me say that my favorite answer is it depends, because it does a lot in UX. But even though that's true in UX, there's very generally a common approach that UXers take to break down problems. And this is something that we'll be going into much more detail in as we get further into the learning. But very generally, the process that UXers go about, kind of understanding problems and then solving them is there's an initial identification of some kind of gap, a problem statement, research and discovery. So understanding like what really is the problem, who does this affect, what are they trying to get done, then creating scenarios to understand the users and the different ways that they would use that, then creating the actual screens or pages or however you're going to pull things together and the flow of how that all works, then layering on that visual design component that I mentioned. And as you'll see, that's just one part of all of the things that a UX designer does. Then there's the testing, the kind of trying it out with real users. Does this in fact work the way you expected it? Does this solve your problem? And then measuring the impact over time, measuring the results, and really incorporating feedback as you go. So every project has unique aspects, but always kind of follows these same common pathways. Let's think about kind of an example of a common approach, right? So let's use that example we talked about before with LinkedIn and with recruiters really having a hard time with understanding, kind of candidates if they're passive, meaning if they're not really actively looking for a job, if they're maybe someone who already has a job. And the goal really with this kind of situation is that, LinkedIn, although they've got tons of users who are job searchers, the way that they make their money is from recruiters. So LinkedIn's goal is to really help recruiters become more aware of candidates' motivations so that they can do a better job finding the right people for the right job. So the solution in mind is kind of to develop a feature that asks users to share those motivations and stores that information so that recruiters can look it up. So let's kind of walk through each of those common steps that we talked about with this example in mind. Okay, so the first one, conducting user research. So this is the part that we talked about like really understanding who these people are that are included in this process, understanding what they really need, what their challenges are, what the gap in the experience is, and really kind of digging into that. So in this case, it's user research, so interviews, and it's passive candidates, so people who are not really actively looking for a job, but then also some active candidates, some recruiters, and a hiring manager, because those are all potential users of this kind of interaction. And really wanted to dig into what challenges are they having, what goals do they have, and what is the best way to share that information. So you might do what we call desk or secondary research, where you look up articles and materials about what motivates employees, what helps them make decisions when they've got multiple offers, who and what they rely on, that kind of thing. But then also doing interviews with real people and really understanding what are they trying to get out of this? What is the most powerful thing? What is the most powerful information that a recruiter can use? And in this case, the team that working on it uncovered that the motivation of the candidate is really the most important piece of information for a recruiter. But LinkedIn didn't have those insights at the time, right? So that was kind of the key insight. That was the key gap that they understood. And once you collect all of that information, This is a part that often gets overlooked, right? Like lots of places teach you how to do the research, how to collect data. But then they forget that you have to figure out how to make sense of it, right? So in the details of the course as we go through, we'll teach you a kind of framework for analyzing and summarizing the patterns and the themes that you understood, right? And so kind of understanding what you've pulled together and how that applies to what you're working on. So in this particular case with LinkedIn, they really kind of pulled together the various factors that drive passive candidates and how they can be effectively addressed. So things like higher compensation, growth opportunity, work-life balance, being able to work remotely. Those were the things that came up over and over again in these conversations that would be compelling to those more passive candidates. Then it's designing the flow, right? And so this is the part where you move from understanding people to starting to craft the experience. So trying to flesh out what are all the different steps that need to be taken from all of the different people involved. So what do the candidates need to do? What do the recruiters need to do? What does the system need to do? So this is called a flow diagram or workflow. And it's really just to identify what are the different steps that need to happen for this process. Not yet thinking, of course, about what the screen looks like, right? Like this isn't the screen. This is just a step describing what that is. And this is not a button, right? This is just indicating that some decision point needs to be done. So this is the part that kind of transitions you from taking information into making it tangible, turning it into something that eventually will be made into actual screens, which as you'll see is the next step. But when we start talking about next steps, you'll see that we suggest using paper, right? So sketching, actually using sticky notes, what each of those steps might look like. And that helps you really quickly get ideas out that you don't get attached to. It doesn't take a long time to iterate if you want to change something. It allows you to kind of easily draw your ideas out for each of those steps and make changes, right? So I don't know about you, but making checkbox on a post-it, not going to take me very long. So creating a paper prototype is something we'll go through in more detail in the course too. But getting, again, it's sort of moving from what we call low fidelity, which really just means less detailed, easier to change, to higher fidelity, working through to high fidelity is what you probably think of when you think of like a mock-up or a prototype. The highest fidelity thing will look the closest to how it will look when it's live. Lowest fidelity is the most representative, but doesn't look exactly how it would look live. Like you can see, this looks like a keypad on a phone, right? You can kind of guess what that is. You know what it is, but you don't have to have the actual phone all the way designed out in order to see that. And then the next step, it finally is that higher fidelity, fleshing out the details of, okay, what could this actually look like? What is the interaction like? What do the buttons look like? What colors do you use? In this case, LinkedIn has a really well-established brand. So using their design systems, like their colors, their button types, etc., but translating those paper prototype kind of low fidelity ideas into the digital prototype. And then we're still not done. So that is where a lot of people think that you stop. But the next step, like we said, is it's not just building something, it's validating these ideas, making sure that what you've built is done well and is easy for people to use. So usability testing to really get people to interact with what you're doing, to make sure that it acts the way that they expect, that it indeed does meet their needs, that it fits their goals, and that there's nothing that you need to iterate or change. And by the way, you almost never conduct usability testing and have nothing to change afterwards. You almost always learn something that could be improved. Great. And so kind of the point of showing all of that is to show all of the different steps and process that go into that core approach for solving problems in UX. So again, those of us in UX, we'll kind of go through all of those different things at some point. And then we get the question, right, of, okay, so I did all this stuff. Now, how do I prove that I can do it again? How do I put that all together? And that's where we really turn to case studies. And this is something that we're going to spend a lot of focus on in our courses as well, because case studies are the way that you can show off your work. They're the way that you can show the process and the skills and really demonstrate your abilities and expertise to solve real world problems. So a case study, unsurprisingly, is just a way to kind of summarize all of that. And when you hear somebody say that they have a portfolio is just made up of various different case studies that you put together. So in the course of the class, the learning program, all of your homework will be elements to help you put together a case study to be in your portfolio. And I know that this comes up a lot. We get tons of questions about portfolios and case studies and what to do. And especially if you're on more like the research and strategy end of things, we get questions about this. But case studies are more than just screenshots. They're more than just showing the final design of, look how pretty this looks, right? Because the thing is that when you work in UX, you really need to be able to demonstrate that you understand your process. So how did you get to the point where you got to that final beautiful design? Did you incorporate the users? Did you focus this around them? Did you kind of go through that process? Because if you're not including users, you're not really doing UX design. Again, you're just doing kind of the visual design, the graphic part, which of course is important, but it's not enough to get you a job in UX. That's not what UX is. So case study will really help you demonstrate the different skills you have for all of the different parts of the process that go into UX. So understanding who those users are, going from gathering data to pulling out insights to turning that into something tangible. This is your chance to show off and really explain your decisions. So the other thing is that everyone in UX works with constraints. Never is there an unlimited budget, unlimited time, unlimited technical ability to just build whatever you want, right? So if you have to make specific choices that, maybe the absolutely ideal experience would be one thing, but you had to do something different because of limited budget. This is your choice, or this is your chance to talk through a potential employer with all of that so that you can show them, if they hired you, that you would be able to make those kinds of decisions in real life context with them as well. And it's also your ability to show your attention to detail. So I used to work at a large recruiting company, and I helped them kind of build up their UX practice there. And what that essentially means is that I reviewed thousands of UX research or UX design and research portfolios, including the case studies. And you would be surprised at how many of them have misspellings or leave out the name of the organization or things like that. So it's really important to be able to show off your attention to detail, your ability to really finely tune, really finely craft things. So that's important. It's an important part of being a designer. And you can really use strong case studies to attract clients or employers, right? So you can really, really show off what you know and help them understand what you're doing and what you've done and how you could do something similar for them. Okay, we don't have time to dig into these now, but we wanted to have these linked here so that you can go check them out. Of course, we included one, but these are some examples of really great case studies of other folks who are in similar roles. So you'll get this slide deck. Check these out later. They'll be able to give you a sense for how other people have put these case studies together. Okay. I'll pause to see if there are any questions, and then we're going to dig into the details of our specific program. Okay, so as I mentioned, of course, there's traditional classes. There's a learning component, but Curious is not just courses, right? That's only the first of 4 major parts. So there's a 16-week program where you'll have a live session like this. You'll get, presented materials. There'll be a live instructor. And for every course that we do, there's hands-on practice during each section. So when you meet with me or one of the other instructors, we'll be presenting content, and then you'll have hands-on practice in each of the courses. And throughout the course of those 16 weeks, all of the homework that you do will go into building one case study. Then there's a built-in internship, and we partner with Careers, has lots of tech partners. We will set up the internship for you. You don't have to worry about any of that. And you get to apply the things that you learned in the initial practice on in the learning in this internship. So you'll be working as part of a design team with one of our partner companies. I don't know who the partner is this year. There'll probably be some follow-up questions about that, but it's important to know the internship is an integral part of your training. It's your chance to apply in real context what you've learned. That said, I know there's lots of questions about logistics. We'll get to that in a minute, but throughout the course of that internship, you'll apply all of that stuff and get to build another case study for your portfolio. Then after those 21, 2-ish weeks plus, then there are 7 one-on-one career coaching sessions before you start applying to jobs. And that's because we want to do things like help you prepare your portfolio, help you prepare your resume, get your LinkedIn profile really finely tuned and crafted. And then comes the job search. And the reason that we have these split out beforehand is because by the time you start looking for a UX job, we want you to have the best possible chance to get that job. We want you to have multiple chances to practice your skills, multiple chances to refine, make sure that you're really ready so that you have the best support you can and the best chance you have to find a job. We say 2 to 6 months because that's kind of a typical range for the active job search. But throughout the course of that, you'll get constant support from a career coach until you get an offer. So we'll help you with things like how to prepare for interviews, how to negotiate, how to get references, that kind of stuff. Okay, and then just a note about some logistics and the timing for each of this. So let me be perfectly clear. Careerist is designed to be done in tandem with your other job if you already have one. So this is not full time. So when we say it's 16 weeks, it's 16 weeks of 2 to 3 days a week. So the courses are Tuesdays and Fridays, 5 p.m. Pacific or 8 p.m. if you're on East Coast like me. Typically 1.5 to 2 hours, and there's always new content and then some practice and a chance to ask questions. Every other Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific or 12 if you're on East Coast time, there will be sessions that are sort of Q&A sessions. So one of us QA or careerist people will be there to help you answer questions. If you want more practice with your homework, if you want to get feedback about something. A big PSA, we really highly recommend that you be in person as much as you can because there's hands-on practice and chance to talk to your classmates and to your instructor. Try to be there as much as you can, but if you miss something, they're all recorded and you get all of the materials. So we know stuff happens, that's no big deal. You can always watch the recordings later. Then when it comes to the internship program, same thing. This is intended to be very part-time and flexible so that you can continue to do this essentially on your own time. So weekly, it can be really flexible, but there'll be 2 2-hour meetings with your instructor, about 2 hours of meetings with your team, and then about 6 hours of individual work time, give or take. That totally depends. Then for the career coaching weeks, you'll have one-on-one sessions with your career coach once a week for 7 weeks, but you can get more support time if you need it, but the 7 sessions are mandatory. And then of course, during your active job search, that will be up to you how much help you need, but your career coach will really try to stay on top of you to track your progress. Typically those are about every other week 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the level of support you need. Because again, the whole gearing of this is so that by the time you get to the active job search, you're in such a good position to get a job that you should be, you should have really clear understanding of what you need to present and how to prepare. Great. And then just to dig in a little bit more about how the breakdown of those 16 weeks works. So the first one's today. Hi. So in the next class, we'll start digging into problem statements. So that was that part I was talking about sort of understanding the gap between what users are trying to get done and what's currently there. In that class, this is super important. You will choose the problem that you will be working on for the whole rest of the 16 weeks, right? So, and this will be your first case study for your portfolio. So pay attention to the problem statement, choose something that you want to work on for 4 months, choose something that is interesting to you, and make sure that you really pay attention because things build on each other as we go. And the clearer you are from the beginning, the easier it will be to do all of the rest of this as we go. So you start with that problem statement definition. Then we'll get into kind of all these different steps that we talked about, right, in terms of tackling the UX design process. So the first one is identifying a problem and really understanding the nuances of it. So conducting interviews, various research methods, understanding how you could get the information that you need. Then analyzing and synthesizing that research, starting to turn the data that you got into actual insights and ideas. Then it's the hypotheses and the flows, right? So then it's starting to translate what you found into what steps do we need to take? What are we guessing is going to be true? Then it's the prototyping phase, those low, mid, and high fidelity prototypes. So starting with paper and moving up to Figma, a lot of the work will be done in Figma. It was really getting hands-on practice, building out prototypes. And then finally, conducting usability testing and integrating what you find into your prototype. So updating the prototype so that's findings from your studies. So the whole process, all the 16 weeks, you're going to be learning new content every week, but you're going to be applying that same content to the same problem that you've identified and working on your case study. So this is my other pro tip for you. Really take your homework seriously, not because we generically care about homework, but because your homework will be the foundation of your case study. And so when you're finished with the 16 weeks, you'll have all of your first project complete and you'll get to the end and you'll have one case study complete to put into your portfolio. And as I said, homework is super important. Some of it is mandatory and some of it is optional. You don't need to upload the optional stuff. For the mandatory homework, again, it's not that you have to get it right the first time, but I recommend really carefully looking at it and utilizing your resources and uploading it on time so that you can get feedback from the instructor. So the thing to keep in mind here is not that you're trying to get it perfect the first time, but that you're really putting enough thought into it the first time and uploading it on time so that you can get feedback and learn as you go, because this homework is going to be the foundation of your case study. And the more work you do in the homework phase, the less work it will be to refine that when you're working on your case study and starting to get ready to look for a job. Then you might see them called a couple of different things, the workshops or the kind of Saturday sessions. These are just intended to be time with the instructors to ask questions, get feedback, get practice on the spot. So sometimes there are activities, and really to also connect with your fellow students, right? Your fellow classmates. So I really recommend taking advantage of these Saturday sessions. They're for you. They are going to be driven by what's important to you, what questions you have, all that kind of thing. So your classmates will be there, everyone will be invited, but the people who get the most out of it are going to be the people who come with questions and the people who ask questions during the sessions, because that's your kind of unfiltered time to just get feedback and ask questions from one of us awesome instructors. Okay, and then as we discussed, we've got the internship, and this is going to be at a real company, one of our partners, and you'll be working in a design team. So you won't be alone, but you'll be kind of applying all of the things that you learned in that core learning course in the real context of working in these organizations. So you'll have support from a team lead, a UX designer who's kind of in the role of lead designer. So they'll do things like, help you understand if you've got a question, they'll give you feedback on your designs, they'll help you. But the goal is for you to really apply what you learned, not in a homework context, but in a real life context. So we'll go all the way through the stages again that we just talked about. That initial research, identifying and clarifying the problem, looking for a solution and building out hypotheses about what that could look like, turning that into the identification of the steps and then the screens, building out your prototype and testing it, and then refining it. And importantly, there will be a final presentation to the partner organization of your final prototype. And that's because another key thing about UX is being able to describe your work, being able to present. That's a core part of getting a job too. So all of that again will be kind of in that bucket of the internship. For a little bit of context, a little bit of background about I think this was 2 cohorts ago, but the internship and kind of what that can look like. So the partner that we had that particular cohort was Level Up Basket, which is a basketball training app for players and coaches. So here's just a little context so that you can see, like, this is the real partner that we have. This is the real kind of process that our team went through in their internship. So the problem that Level Up had identified and that the team helped sort of clarify was that amateur basketball players really need help finding courts and teams so that they can play. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but even I know that you need other people and a court and a ball, right? So they're really looking to kind of connect people who are, they're not professionals, they're just people who want to play basketball for fun. So trying to find other like-minded people, so 10 to 15 players who are kind of the same level, and connecting them with courts. And for the business side of things, they really want to increase app engagement. They have a free version and a paid version, and they really wanted to increase the engagement with the free version so that the users could in turn be more likely to purchase the premium subscriptions so that they could access additional content. So there's a real tangible outcome for Level Up Basket. And this is just a quick summary. We didn't show the whole process here, but the team, student team went through all of the steps: research, analysis, hypothesis generation, scenarios, prototyping, testing, iteration. And this is the LinkedIn post from the internship partner. And as you can see by the emojis alone, he was so happy. And not only was he so happy, but again, this is real life impact to his real company. They were so super impressed with their work that they're now in round 2 of conducting testing with kind of implementing those suggestions. So your internship will be very real. It will be in a real context, and you'll have a chance to really make an impact on the company that you work with. Okay, and then as I mentioned, the coaching part, this is super important. This is 7+ weeks. We say 7+ because there are 7 mandatory one-on-one sessions. And again, the whole idea is to get you all the way prepared for your job search. So things like getting your resume ready, polishing your portfolio, excuse me, preparing for your interview, preparing to present your work and your portfolio, doing a critique or doing problem solving exercises in the interviews, which are super common for UX interviews, practice with the behavioral questions you might get, and actually doing a mock interview. So this career coaching piece is just 1 session a week, but these 7 weeks are really crucial because the whole point is to get you as prepared as possible for the next phase, which is finding a job. So when you are done, you'll have a portfolio with 2 case studies in it, and you can really expect to be very comfortable with the process of the entire UX design flow. So everything from conducting those initial research stages, forming hypotheses, creating prototypes, testing them, and presenting them out. So also you'll get these, we don't have time to go into them now, but you can see the portfolios of a couple of our past graduates as examples. So you can see the kind of thing that you might have the output to. And again, just in more detail, these are kind of the specific things that you should be able to do at the end. So everything, again, from understanding product development lifecycle, defining problem statements, conducting brainstorming sessions, that initial stuff, all the way through to, visual rules in Figma, choosing color schemes, composition, typography, grids, UI kits, everything in between. That's a lot of stuff in actually not that much time, but you're in very good hands. So again, and I've mentioned this before, the one thing that we really like to reiterate here is that you will get out as much as you put in here. You have lots of support in careers. So we really recommend that you take advantage of it. Ask questions, show up to the live lessons, take advantage of your support, communicate in Slack, communicate in the Saturday sections, ask for feedback, and putting in a little bit of extra effort in these ways will really help you get the most out of this. And as I said, while I am, fairly experienced myself, I am humbled to be among a list of other really experienced instructors too. So as you can see, all of us, and there's actually another slide of instructors too, because there's a bunch of us, we've got a really experienced set of people here to help you learn UX. So all of us currently work in the industry, which means that we all have other jobs. So we are all, we kind of take turns and cover each other that we can so that we can get all of the content that you need. And again, you can read more and look up all these people and get more of the detail, but I'm in great company. Kim is a design researcher at Microsoft. She's done several cohorts. She's a really experienced instructor. She's awesome. Jonathan is a UX designer and design researcher for Lowe's. He's got 24 years of experience. He's great. May is our Figma pro. She's really focused on the UI aspect and UX product design, creative direction. Christy Bock Hopper, again, someone who has so much experience. She's currently the product design manager and portfolio lead at Optum Financial. So big role there, but she's got insights for everything on scaling teams at large enterprises. She's done a ton of team building, so she's got really great insight into hiring. Excuse me. Aaron, who's been a senior UX designer at Walmart for almost 20 years. He previously worked at Amazon. Ksenia, who's currently a product designer at Meta at Facebook. And she's been one of the really key training experts at Careers. She's got tons of experience. Hamad, similarly, if there's anything about UX that has ever existed, Hamad has probably done it. He's done UI design and development. He's also done tons of usability and accessibility work. He's got a really wide range of experience. So does Sola. Sola's a product design system engineer at Toyota. So he's really focused on the kind of the design side of things. He's got great expertise in Adobe XD and Figma. And he does some development as well. So he's got tons of that kind of background. And, he's been previously at Airbnb and Meta. And then Rich, who's a senior lead product designer at IBM, the Watson Data and AI team, which is a good one. And he's been at Lifetime and Best Buy and Target and Comcast. We've ran out of fancy logos to put because he's just so experienced. So as I said, you're in very good hands here at Careerist. And all of us are really passionate about helping you succeed. Our goal here, our focus is on really helping you get to a place where you can work on this kind of stuff too. So if you have any questions at all, really recommend that you reach out, you take advantage of all the great people that you have at your disposal here. And I know we've been talking about Chorus a lot, but I really want to kind of reiterate why we recommend going with Chorus. So you probably know there are tons of boot camps. There is, there are tons of online courses. There are tons of materials. There's tons of UX stuff out there. And that's all great. It's not to say that the other ones aren't great, but there's something really special about Chorus, and it's really the combination of everything that we have. So the first is that this is not just a willy-nilly group of stuff pulled from ChatGPT about UX, right? Like, there's collectively some of the most experienced people in UX work on this program, and so you get real training and get a real opportunity to get feedback by industry experts. The sessions are convenient; they're online 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the week. They're relatively easy to get in, and I promise they're fun. And you get hands-on training, hands-on practice, as well as just listening. I think actually this class is the one with the most instructor talking and the least interaction from the team. But that's just, kind of the first 2 parts. Then there's the internship, building out the case study, their career coaching, the preparation for interviewings, the polishing and assistance with your resume, your LinkedIn, and your job application submissions. Our goal isn't just to teach you UX, it's to get you a job in UX. And you could learn UX with just the first part, but getting you a job is this whole package, these all 7 parts. And we feel so confident about that, in fact, that there's a career guarantee because we're so fully committed to your success. There's a 100% money back guarantee if you don't land a job in tech within a year of graduation. Now, of course, you do in fact have to actually complete all your training. You do have to submit your projects. You do have to follow our instructions. But the reason that we say that is because we can't guarantee it if you don't follow what we know works, right? So there's many more details to that. You can dig in at careers.com if you have more questions about that. But we mean it when we say we really want you to get a job, and we will do everything in our power to prepare you for that and to help you with that. So if you do your part, do all of the learning and kind of put the time in, we really feel fully committed to getting you to that goal. And as you know, tuition, there's a special for those webinar participants only. So if you're here right now listening to this, your upfront cost is $4,900. And that's the admission fee, job application services, all of that. But if you have any questions about it, or if you hadn't yet signed up and you want to now, reach out to advisors at careers.com. You can ask them any question about any part of the program. I know that although I've been with you for a while, we had a lot to cover. There was a lot of detailed content. So if you have any follow-up questions, advisors at careers.com is the place to go for anything about, kind of what the program looks like or anything like that. And then otherwise, again, your support person is Mo, and really take advantage of all of the awesome people. Because as you've seen, I am just one of a big team of people who is here for you in the UX program. So we really hope to see you there. I hope I get to see you in the coming weeks. I hope I get to talk to you more about this. And really what I'm excited about is seeing where you all go when you leave Careers, because I know that this program is really impactful and I can't wait to see where you all go. All right, I'll pause now for any questions. Okay, great. Well, appreciate all of those questions. If you do have any more questions about the training or any questions after this lesson, again, you can email advisors at careers.com. They'll get you answers quickly. I will also stay later if anybody wants to say. I know it's kind of late for some of you, but if you've got any more questions, immediate questions tonight, please do let me know. And I hope that most of you will be here next week. So the next lesson is going to be really to start diving into that process that we talked about. So we're going to review the overall product development process and how it relates to design thinking. We're going to learn more about the particular role of a UX designer in product teams. We're going to understand the difference between UX and UI design in more detail, even though I mentioned it a little bit tonight. And we're going to really dig into practice writing those problem statements, understanding those nuances. So I want to say thank you again for all of you joining. I hope that you come next week. And I want to wish you good luck in this expenditure. This is very exciting. Good luck with all of it, and I will see you soon. Thank you.